Hi, this is Christopher Ori, and I'm here to talk a little bit about blended and remote learning, kind of guidelines and best practices. And right now, this is being driven by COVID-19 and our response and how we can support our students through that process. But topic of this has come up before when, for example, colleagues have experienced deaths in the family and suddenly have to be out for a while, or we have a sick kid and suddenly we can't come to school. Even I think back when I've taken weeks off at a time for paternity leave, how do I maintain learning experiences for our students? This has come up again and again, and fundamentally it comes down to this question of how do we support our kids when life happens? How do we maintain consistency for our students and keep them on track? And how do we help each other out through this process? So right now, I'm going to walk through some guidelines and best practices that kind of overarchingly help us understand what this can look like. There'll be other videos that will get down into the details of how we do this. Some guiding questions for this particular one, given our current scenario, but really in general, how do we keep our students on track with class if they're absent for an extended period of time? So typically we just wait for students to get caught up when they return, but if students are going to be absent for a long period of time, we don't want them to get buried in work and then have the stress of getting caught up. How can we keep them on track while they're absent? And are we prepared if we suddenly can't come to school, whether that's for COVID-19 or because life happens? Do we have the systems in place where we can still be the teacher and still have this learning experiences for our students, even if we're not physically present? And how does this all change if suddenly we all have to be at home and we all move into a fully remote learning model? So in online learning, there's these two descriptors of learning. There's synchronous versus asynchronous learning. And synchronous is what it sounds like. It's in sync. It's what we do in the classroom already. The students and the teacher are moving at the same pace together. Students can ask questions, teachers can ask questions, and it's this two-way street. So when you're thinking about a blended or remote learning model, it's important to think about, is there something that you do where you really absolutely truly need that back and forth with your students? If you need to be able to ask questions and get that immediate response from students so that you can give the feedback, then synchronous may be what you need to do. And for us, in our district, kind of the best tool for this at our fingertips is Google Hangouts Meet. It's a video conferencing tool where we can actually video chat with up to 250 individuals. So in this way, we could set a time, students log in, and what's more, we can record it for students to watch later. And that's kind of where asynchronous comes in. So asynchronous is also what we do in the class. These two aren't mutually exclusive. Asynchronous is when students move at their own pace. They can read, watch videos, do whatever instructional things you've created, but they go at their own pace and they turn it in. And we have kind of two main tools for this. Canvas is our learning management system that allows us to do all these things. It's the ecosystem that students interact. And then the Google Suite allows us to interface with Canvas and do a lot of the things that we typically might do in paper form in a digital model. And so with those two tools, we can accomplish 90% of this asynchronous and synchronous learning. So as you start getting ready for this, the most important thing is that we stick together and we start supporting one another. I was thinking, Julie and I were talking about how it's kind of like in Toy Story when they're getting ready to move and everybody's got to have a buddy. One of the things I really want to emphasize is have a buddy. Think about who else teaches the same course as you, and buddy up with them. So make them teachers in your own Canvas course and get your course content online. Get as much of your stuff. If you have PowerPoints on your computer, get them into Google Drive. If you have documents, get them onto Google Drive or Canvas, whatever it takes, get it online. So that if at a moment's notice you were unavailable, you could fall back on your buddy and they can kind of help you out, and vice versa. They can help you out. And that can really help alleviate the stress knowing that you've got somebody. Now we also have a lot of singletons. So if you are the only one who teaches your class, find a buddy. Find somebody in your department and support each other. Now, in that same thread, divide and conquer. There's no reason why we all have to be doing this on our own. If you teach a course with somebody else. You could be dividing up the work, doing some of the same work. If you're, you know, effectively co-teaching the course, you can really support each other in that process. It's going to start feeling different. So think about your core routines and processes, the things that you do in class, and think about just how could I use Canvas to do that. So really start thinking in terms of how might we. You'd be surprised at how much of what we can do in the digital, in physical space, we could kind of pivot and shift into a digital model. So what's next? So we're going to be giving different guidelines for these different scenarios. The scenarios, again, being what do we do if a bunch of students are suddenly unavailable? What do we do if we suddenly are unavailable? Or what do we do generally if we are all unavailable and we're in a fully remote model? And coming from that then will be this kind of rubric / table that we've created where we've provided links to PD for each of these kind of 4 main areas. So how do we provide instruction? How do we have interaction, student to student, teacher to student interaction? How do we basically digitize our course activities? And then how do we check for understanding, both informative and summative ways? And so we'll have kind of different levels of depth and support for students, but look for that video to kind of break that down for you. I want to say just kind of generally best practices about a blended or remote learning model. You know, school is one of the most consistent aspects of students' lives, and if they suddenly cannot come to school, that's a real wrench in their life. And so what we want to do is provide as much structure and support for them as possible, and use Canvas to help make that possible. So having a daily announcement, whether we're in a blended or a fully remote model, making sure that students are getting that. You know, all of us, we check in with our kids at the start of class. You got to put that in your announcement, or put that in your Canvas page, so that they're feeling like you're still checking in with them, caring about them, and getting input from them. Good practice, like we always do. You'll want to make sure you follow up on where have we been, what did we do previous class, and set a clear path of what's next. What are our expectations? This is where you can then begin linking to relevant assignments, videos, discussions, etc. And if you plan on doing a synchronous lesson like Google Hangout, you'll want to put that link in there, and you can always go back and post the video. Now, if you're starting to think about recording videos, hopefully I'm taking my own advice, 15 minutes max. As somebody who's taught a lot of lessons through vodcasts, 15 minutes is max. We don't want to do really long videos because students are going to be pausing and rewinding, so it's very easy for a 15-minute video to turn into a 30 to 45-minute process for students. So make it quick, get to the point. Don't be a perfectionist. I made this mistake early on where I kept stopping and recording, and it just ate up a ton of time. You make mistakes in your class all the time. Students are used to it. Just roll with it. It's actually way more authentic if you just roll with it. Unless it's catastrophic, just keep recording. And don't worry too much about fancy editing and post-production. A lot of teachers are self-conscious about their face being in it. You don't have to have your face in it, and nobody likes listening to their audio, so don't worry about that. I never listen to my own videos because I can't listen to my own voice. I think the best advice I could give is to be your authentic self. Just be yourself. It's going to come across more naturally for you. You'll feel more comfortable. The students will feel more comfortable. Just be yourself. If we go to a fully remote model, it just becomes really clear and important that you have this cycle of a class, which would be every other day. You give an announcement. You give some sort of form of instruction, what that is for your class. You have some way of checking for understanding for kids to show that they have some way of applying what they've learned, and that you have some sort of closure. So be thinking about over the course of a 2-day period that includes class / homework, that you're going through that cycle. And again, look for a future video to kind of help support you in how you could do those things. So the last thing I just want to say is that it's going to feel really different for some of us, but remember that this is about maintaining consistency for our students so that they feel like they're still getting the same education that they would if they were in class, or at least as close to it as possible, that you're still there for them, and that they're going to get through this okay. A blended or online class is totally what you make of it. you are still the teacher. You're creating the learning experiences for your students. So it's really going to be what you make of it. And again, be your authentic self. That's what kids are used to. That's what they expect from you. So keep that at the forefront of your mind. And while this isn't ideal, it's never going to be as good as having kids in class. We can get through this. It's definitely a mitigation. We're going to be okay. So thanks for watching. I hope that's helpful.